What if Earth stopped spinning? Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and looking outside your window to see the sun frozen in place. No sunrise, no sunset, just the sun hanging motionless in the sky like a giant spotlight that someone forgot to turn off. This isn't science fiction, this is what would happen if Earth suddenly stopped spinning on its axis. And trust me, what comes next would make the worst disaster movie look like a gentle bedtime story. Right now, as you're watching this video, you're traveling at over 1,000 miles per hour without even realizing it. That's faster than a jet plane. But what if that cosmic carousel suddenly slammed on the brakes? What would happen to the oceans? What would happen to you? And could humanity possibly survive such an event? Today, we're going to explore three mind-bending questions. First, what would happen to everything on Earth's surface the moment our planet stops spinning? Second, how would this affect our weather, our oceans, and the very air we breathe? And finally, is there any possible way life could survive on a world where one side bakes in eternal sunlight while the other freezes in endless darkness? Welcome to Uncharted Science, where we explore the most fascinating what-if scenarios in our universe. The moment Earth stops. Surface catastrophe. Let's start with the most immediate and terrifying consequence of Earth stopping its rotation. To understand this, we need to think about something called rotational inertia. Picture yourself sitting in a car that's cruising down the highway at 60 miles per hour. Now imagine that car suddenly hits an invisible wall and stops instantly, but your seatbelt breaks. What happens? You keep moving forward at 60 miles per hour until something stops you. Hopefully the airbag, but in this scenario, probably the windshield. This is exactly what would happen to everything on Earth's surface if our planet suddenly stopped spinning on its axis. Every building, every tree, every car, every person, and every animal would suddenly become a supersonic projectile. The devastation would be beyond anything we could imagine. Entire cities will be flattened not by earthquakes or hurricanes, but by their own contents flying eastward at incomprehensible speeds. The Statue of Liberty would become a massive copper missile. Skyscrapers would topple like dominoes, their debris creating destructive waves of concrete and steel racing across the landscape. But the destruction wouldn't stop there. The oceans, which contain billions of tons of water, would also keep moving at their original rotational speed. This would create tsunami waves that would make the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami look like a gentle ripple. These waves wouldn't be just hundreds of feet tall. They would be miles high, carrying enough water to submerge entire mountain ranges. The atmosphere itself would become a weapon. The air we breathe, which normally moves along with Earth's rotation, would suddenly become hurricane-force winds of unimaginable strength. These wouldn't be ordinary hurricanes with speeds of 150 miles per hour. These would be atmospheric rivers moving at nearly 1,000 miles per hour, stripping away anything that somehow survived the initial impact. Even the ground beneath our feet wouldn't be safe. The sudden stop would create massive earthquakes as the planet's crust, no longer held in its familiar rotational pattern, would crack and shift. Volcanic activity would increase dramatically as the stress on tectonic plates would become unbearable. The very foundation of our world would become unstable. Climate chaos and atmospheric transformation. Now, let's imagine that somehow, magically, everything survived that initial catastrophe. What would the world look like in this new reality where Earth no longer spins? The changes to our climate and atmosphere would be so dramatic that our planet would become virtually unrecognizable. First, let's talk about what creates our current weather patterns. Earth rotation is the driving force behind almost everything we consider normal weather. The spinning of our planet creates something called the Coriolis effect, which is responsible for the way storms rotate, the direction of trade winds, and even the circulation patterns in our oceans. Without Earth's rotation, all of these systems would collapse. Think about hurricanes for a moment. These massive storms get their characteristic spiral shape because of Earth's rotation. On a non-spinning Earth, hurricanes as we know them couldn't exist. Instead, we'd have completely different weather patterns that we can barely imagine. The typical circulation of air masses from high pressure to low pressure areas would be fundamentally altered. But here's where it gets really interesting and terrifying. Without rotation, we'd have what scientists call a day-night terminator, a permanent line dividing the light side of Earth from the dark side. One hemisphere would face the sun constantly, while the other would be plunged into eternal darkness. This would create the most extreme weather conditions imaginable. The sun-facing side would become a furnace. Without the cooling effect of night, temperatures would continue to rise until they reached extreme levels. We're talking about temperatures that could potentially reach 200 degrees Fahrenheit or more in some regions. The constant solar heating would create massive updrafts of air that would rise high into the atmosphere, creating permanent storm systems unlike anything we've ever seen. Meanwhile, the dark side would become a frozen wasteland. Without any sunlight to provide warmth, temperatures would plummet far below anything experienced even in Antarctica. We're talking about temperatures that could drop to minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. The extreme cold would cause the atmosphere on the dark side to literally freeze out, with water vapor turning to ice crystals and falling as snow. This temperature difference between the two sides would create incredibly powerful wind systems. Air from the hot side would rise and flow towards the cold side, creating permanent hurricane-force winds at the terminator line, the boundary between light and dark. These winds would be constant and incredibly destructive, carrying heat from the day side towards the night side, but never enough to truly balance the temperature difference. The water cycle would be fundamentally altered. On the hot side, massive amounts of water would evaporate from the oceans, creating thick, permanent cloud cover. But here's the fascinating part. Most of this water vapor would eventually make its way to the cold side, where it would freeze and fall as snow. Over time, this could create massive ice sheets on the dark side, while potentially drying out large portions of the sunny side. The jet stream, which currently regulates weather patterns across the globe, would be completely disrupted. Instead of the familiar jet stream patterns that meteorologists use to predict weather, we'd have entirely new atmospheric rivers flowing from the hot side to the cold side of the planet. The survival question: could life endure? This brings us to our final and perhaps most important question. Could life possibly survive on such a dramatically altered planet? The answer is both more hopeful and more complex than you might expect. Let's start with the harsh reality. The vast majority of life on Earth would not survive the initial stopping event or the dramatic climate changes that would follow. The extreme temperatures on both sides of the planet would make most regions uninhabitable for life as we know it. The sun-facing side would be too hot for most organisms, while the dark side would be too cold. However, there's a narrow zone that might offer hope: the terminator line, the boundary between the light and dark side. This region would experience a kind of permanent twilight, with temperatures that might be more moderate than either extreme. Think of it as a narrow band around the planet where it's always dawn or dusk. In this twilight zone, temperatures might be similar to what we experience during a mild spring or fall day. The constant wind from the temperature differential would be challenging, but not necessarily impossible for life to adapt to. Some hardy plants and animals might be able to survive in this region, especially if they could adapt to the constant wind and the unique lighting conditions. Similarly, underground ecosystems might provide refuges for life. Cave systems, underground rivers, and geothermal areas could maintain more stable temperatures and provide environments where life could persist. Some scientists believe that much of Earth's early life actually existed in these underground environments, so in some ways life might be returning to its ancient roots. But what about human civilization? Could we possibly survive and adapt to this new world? The answer would depend largely on our technology and our ability to adapt quickly. Humans would need to migrate to the Terminator Zone or develop underground cities to survive. We'd need to completely rethink agriculture, energy production, and city planning. On the bright side, the sun-facing side of Earth would provide unlimited solar energy. If we could develop technology to harness this energy and transport it to habitable zones, we might be able to create sustainable communities. What do you think? Could you imagine living in the twilight zone of a non-spinning Earth? What challenges do you think would be the hardest to overcome? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more mind-bending science scenarios. Until next time, keep exploring the uncharted frontiers of science.